Recognize. Umbral Walker. D01. Recognize. The Caleb G. D02.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Whelmed, Episode 2. I am your co-host, Caleb. I might be fast with my feet, but not so fast with my mouth. And I'm here to introduce Rich Howard. He's just here to give us a tour of the clubhouse.
Stay out of my head, Caleb.
If you want to get in touch with us, the show Twitter is at the YJ Files. You can email us whelmedpodcast@gmail.com, or of course hit our website crashingthemode.com. Rich is available at Umbral Walker. I am of course at the Caleb G. But enough with that, Rich. Let's talk about Welcome to Happy Harbor.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, Superboy and I live here. We can play tour guides.
Don't look at me.
We're going to start with our introductory segment here.
Hello, Megan.
And we've got a couple bullet points about the episode itself. Go ahead, Rich.
All right. Hello, Megan. Welcome to Happy Harbor. It's the name of the third episode in the series. Second, if you consider the original two double-sized premiere as one episode. The release date was January 21st, 2011. You will see as we go along, these release dates get a little wonky, which is what happened during the original release, unfortunately. The in-episode date is July 17th. The director was Jay Oliva, who I absolutely adore. Has so many directorial things, it's hard to even start talking about what he's done. And the writer is Kevin Hopps. Kevin Hopps is also a highly experienced writer working on the original Justice League, Zeta Project, which was a spin-off of Batman Beyond, which was a fantastic short-lived show. Of course, Young Justice, but he's also been a writer on some recent episodes of Star Wars Rebels over the last couple of years. He's got some writing chops for sure, which will be interesting as we talk about this episode, because as I mentioned last episode, this one's not my favorite. This one's not my favorite episode, I have to say. So I'm glad we're moving this one, talking about this one a bit, and then moving on to the rest.
You know, I actually agree with you, Rich. I still love the episode. There's nothing wrong with it, but other episodes are a lot better on that scale. So
they're tighter somehow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, tighter somehow. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, let's hit some bullet points here for our mission briefing and go over exactly what happened here quickly.
Sure. The episode opens with Aqualad, Robin, and Kid Flash trying to talk Speedy into joining the team and failing. They help him with the mission he's doing before he goes completely solo later in the series. He's still got his old costume. He's still got his Speedy costume. He hasn't kind of found his own identity yet.
He's also really, really angry in this scene. I feel like that amped up a lot.
It did, and I guess that's why I paused. Their dialogue in this is really strange. The dialogue in the whole episode has, it's like they haven't, Kevin Hopps hadn't quite nailed the characters yet, or Jay Oliva didn't quite know how to direct the actors. They hadn't kind of found their feet yet. So there was a few comments that kind of missed the mark. And as angry as Rory is, and you accept that, particularly with the over the top in the original episodes, he's just meaner. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like meaner in a not good way in this one. And Kid Flash has a couple jokes that just kind of weirdly miss the mark, or they're a little too immature even for Wally. Like, it's just kind of odd. And so in that opening scene, it's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah. But then we move past that opening scene, and the majority of the episode is a lot of exposition. It's a lot of the team talking about what they can do, what they can't do.
Yeah.
It's handled pretty well, but again, it feels off. The pilot episodes, those first two episodes, were so impressive and so tight. And this one just falls a little bit flat. And this is something I know we're going to get into a little bit later in our Canary debrief, but there's just a lot of telling.
Yep, exactly.
It feels like there's so much more weight on what the characters are saying as opposed to what's happening on screen.
Right, exactly. And a lot of that happens right before even any of the action happens, so it feels weirdly long. The team comes up against a mystery villain called Mr. Twister, who is attacking the power station at Happy Harbor. So at first it seems kind of weird. Like, why is a supervillain attacking a power station in some rinky-dink town in the middle of nowhere that superheroes just happen to be nearby? It does get explained away, but it just felt weird. And I think because the first 2 episodes, I liked them a lot and saw they could do some great things, I still hadn't had my feet under me about what this show was going to be about. So this episode felt like a lot of other animated series episodes. Not that tight, that they weren't going to really put a lot of attention into it. They're just kind of throwing some stuff up on the screen. So I didn't really kind of get what was happening. And so they fight Twister, and they come to the conclusion that he's actually Red Tornado in a costume testing them, because Miss Martian can't read his mind, assumes he's an android, which ends up being true. He's just not Red Tornado.
But I will point out that he is, in fact, John Delancey.
Oh, nice.
John Delancey, who you all should know as the voice of Q from Star Trek.
Yeah, that's so funny. I guess he's kind of robotized in the episode. He's synthesized. I didn't catch that, actually.
Yeah, he really snuck in. And that is not the first time this will happen in Young Justice. A lot of very cool voice actors have gotten in there. At least one more from Star Trek, so there's something to look forward to if we want to tease down the road. But so yeah, the team is fighting Mr. Twister here. Eventually, Miss Martian realizes it is not Red Tornado and comes up with a plan. They then have another giant throwdown, brawling match, and they end up winning.
Yeah, it's they have a lot of. It's kind of a team building episode, sort of. But like as we said, it's like everybody's kind of just a little meaner and weirder in this episode than in a way that seems a little out of character for them. It's a bit of a rough kind of first outing for them, and it turns out okay, and it helps introduce Miss Martian to the team because we already had kind of the dynamic set up between Superboy and Aqualad and Kid Flash and Robin and all in the pilot episodes. So it does help to introduce Miss Martian, but she gets treated pretty badly in this episode, and it continues with my concerns that I had mentioned in our previous episode, which was the idea that this potentially strong female character was not going to be handled very well. I'm glad that entirely is not true. In fact, Miss Martian is one of the most interesting deep and character growth characters in the series, as it turns out. But when I was first watching it, I distinctly remember thinking like, oh my god, can we please get some strong female characters in the show? Artemis hadn't shown up yet, Zatanna hadn't shown up yet, Rocket hadn't shown up, like all these other characters that show up eventually down the line, especially in season 2, weren't here yet.
So that is the basics of the mission here in Welcome to Happy Harbor. Let's move right into feeling the Aster, because we've pretty much been hitting our opinions throughout this entire conversation so far.
Yeah, already. Yeah, for sure. There were definitely some things I loved about the episode. There's some things I kind of liked, but there's definitely, I'm feeling down the line like this is going to be the episode where I'm going to have the most dislikes.
If I can interject my opinion of your reaction here, Rich.
Yeah.
I think it's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, this episode feels like a very typical superhero cartoon episode.
Yeah,
it's
does.
very strictly the 3-act plot. We very much see this, oh, here's a problem. Oh, we're going to fight it. Oh, it's not what we think it is. Oh, it's so tropey and cliche. The pilot episodes set up this larger world and tease a much deeper, larger story.
Yeah.
And then we're immediately shown something that is just like every other cartoon we've ever watched. So I think that's where the disconnect and slightly negative reaction is coming.
Yeah.
Especially because we have seen this series so many times. We know the high points it can reach. And now we see this low point happening so early in season 1. It's very disheartening.
Yeah, and it's actually, when I was rewatching it, I was like, man, this is a bummer that this is going to be our second episode, because I don't know, people are going to hear us saying like this episode isn't very, it's fine. It's fine. It's a fine episode. It's okay. It's just not great, and it certainly doesn't, as you say, reach the heights that the rest of the series comes to. And you make a really good point. I think what happened is I'm like, oh, in this first pilot, it's like there's Batman and there's all the other rest of the Justice League, and it's like this bigger world, and there's all these things happening. Oh no, is this going to be a villain of the week attacking Happy Harbor series? Is that what's going to happen? Like, it's already really weird that this Twister guy is attacking a freaking power station in this tiny town. Is that all we're going to see for the rest of the season? Like, so I just didn't know what was happening. It hadn't established itself yet. And we only got Red Tornado as a glimpse. There were some things I liked about the fact that Red Tornado didn't intervene with the problem. Pretty much every other episode has a much wider lens and isn't just focused on Happy Harbor. It was an important episode to like establish a bunch of stuff for sure, like what is the cave and where did it come from, which is actually from the comics, things like that, and what people can and can't do. It was just an unfortunate. It's like a role-playing game. You're sitting around a table and you're like, oh, what can you do? What class are you? You know, oh, you can shapeshift? Oh, but you can't do this. Oh, okay, that's good. I mean, it's not interesting. It's just, like you say, it's exactly what you said. It's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing through, like, the action and plot.
With a little bit of a downer here, let's recover. Let's talk about what we really liked with this episode. What are some high points for you, Rich? What did you enjoy?
There was definitely some little things that I felt like started to give a glimpse of that subtle storytelling that we saw in the pilot. One of them was Superboy's reaction when Miss Martian telepathically talks to everybody in the room. She's just like, oh, it's okay. Here, I have a human name now. You know, you can call me Megan Morse. And then Superboy starts to walk out of the room and she thinks that he's upset because he doesn't have a human name. And she crawls into his head and says, that's okay, we'll get you a human name too, and is telepathically invading everybody's minds. And of course, that triggers Superboy badly because he had been programmed in a pod by the genomes and the whole deal. So his reaction is like entirely appropriate. Like, this is not okay. Get out of my head now. Like, that was a really good character moment where I did realize, oh, okay, there's going to be some conflict in this. And then hopefully they'll grow into a team, just like the original Titans was not just a team, but a family, right? So it's starting from a rough spot. I really like that.
And that's also very akin to one of the things I picked up on as one of my favorites for this episode. It's showing us that Miss Martian is definitely from a different culture.
Yeah.
And there is that culture shock of her not only learning what it's like to be on Earth, but what it's like to have a family that is not Martian.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode paints it out very clearly when she just says, well, on Mars, everyone talks telepathically. What's wrong with you?
Yeah,
basically.
Right. Exactly. And that comes up again in episodes down the line, too. She continues to learn with some pretty entertaining side effects.
And that's one of the things I like about it, this episode specifically, because it's setting up her journey.
Right.
It's making it very clear that she is not instantly acclimated to Earth life.
Yeah.
And it's telling us that she is going to be learning as the series goes on. So I think that is one really, really good thing about this episode, because it starts that journey. And a lot of what we're going to talk about in this episode is good because it starts or sets something up down the road.
I agree. And we'll talk about, in the spoilers section in Crashing the Mode, we'll talk about some of those other things that were established as well. Another thing I love was the introduction of the bioship. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it was fighting Tyranids with Space Marines when I was a kid, or I don't know what, but I love living bioships, or the space whales from the old Chris Claremont X-Men Brood Wars series, or the Leviathans from Farscape. And I just love living bioships. And this shape-shifting bioship, it's probably one of my favorite things in the entire episode that they established and really kind of kept me there. It is an absolutely perfect addition to a covert team. The fact that it can shapeshift, the fact that it can give them the tools and the things that they need during a mission, the fact that it can cloak, all of those things would be exactly what I would do as a GM in a game or an author in a book, to give my team something cool and interesting, a base of operations that isn't just the cave, like something that they can really feel like they have control over. And it though they didn't really emphasize as much like that it has a personality. Through season 1 and season 2, you do get the idea that it is not just an organism, that it actually has a brain and feelings and things like that. The way that Miss Martian refers to it, like, that felt weird, she didn't like that, or she's getting old. And, you know, you could pass that off, I guess, as like every ship is called a she kind of a concept, but that's not what she's talking about. The ship gets hurt, she gets hurt. I love that whole idea. Mm-hmm. The only thing I didn't like about it, and this is minor, I get it, but where she refers to it as a Martian oh, this is my Martian bioship. And I just I hate that. It's so Earth-centric. There's no way that a human astronaut on another planet is going to say, oh, this is my Earth metal ship, or this is my Earth rocket ship. Like, I just don't like that phrasing. That's the cliche ant thing. Like, we know it's Martian. It's clearly not human. You're Martian. It's an assumed that it's Martian. Like, it's just this, and it shouldn't bug me that much, but the reason why I'm so excited about this show is that there is so little of that in the entire show. They dig deeper. They don't take the first thing off the cliche shelf, right? And this is the first thing off the cliche shelf on the dialogue. And some of this dialogue in this episode does that, which made me feel like, oh, okay, it'll be fun. It'll be okay. It'll be a fun show to watch, but I don't expect to be impressed.
But all that being said, there are also some examples of some other really great dialogue in this episode, specifically towards the very end. Well, kind of setting up in the beginning and concluding at the end. Calder has a conversation with Connor.
Oh, yeah.
About apologizing to Miss Martian.
Because of his overreaction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And Calder says something along the lines of, sometimes you just have to say you're sorry. And it's kind of left off before the adventure starts to happen. At the very end of the episode, Connor just looks at Miss Martian and says, sorry.
Right. He takes it very literally. I think Connor says, like, I know what you're thinking. You overreacted. You don't know how to apologize. He said, just say sorry, or something very specific, like, just say sorry. Mm-hmm. And so Connor literally just says sorry. Right? He just turns and says, sorry, and then walks away. That's the line. I love it, actually. Right. I agree.
Especially because I love the build of the friendship and relationship between Connor and Miss Martian.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is that very first instance. They clashed so harshly at the start of the episode, and then they continue to clash, some of that very harsh treatment of Miss Martian that we've talked about already.
Yeah.
But at the very end, he apologizes.
Yeah.
And I think that is indicative of him trying to learn more about what it is to be human and not a vat-grown clone.
Right.
And it's him saying, all right, well, this kind of put us together as a team. This is how I have to function as a team. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he didn't know what apologizing meant or what weight it carried.
Yeah.
But he was putting himself out there to do the right thing.
Right. And that's one of the things I love about Connor, to have a little bit of a sidebar. Just the idea of Connor in general. He's a character who could have been troublesome from a storytelling standpoint. He continued to potentially be this cliched teenage angst-ridden, I'm gonna rebel against everything kind of a thing, but he didn't. He does rebel at times. He has issues with who he is and what he is, but you see, and again, subtly, particularly in the episode 5, Schooled, which is one of my favorite episodes, you can see that he wants to be a hero. He has a choice between being a weapon and a hero, and he's trying to do the hero route. And it's hard because he has to live up to Superman's reputation, and he doesn't know how to be not angry, right? He doesn't know how to be not angry, but he's trying, and you can see him trying hard and stumbling, not just because he's stumbling in his own mind, but stumbling because the world is making him stumble. And he doesn't have the experience to be able to fix it yet, which he gets in season 2. And you see this great character growth and him mature so greatly as a character into season 2.
Absolutely, yeah. He becomes easily one of my favorite characters just by virtue of his character development. Like I love a lot of the cool things he does, but just looking at his story is so cool. Let's talk a little bit about kind of this big extended fight scene. This is where, unfortunately, a lot of our dislikes came up.
Yeah.
It was really cool that even though Tornado was only in the episode briefly, he did actually let the team solve the problem themselves. He didn't just sweep in and be the savior because he's a Justice Leaguer.
Right.
However, this fight also, I think, is kind of the crux of some of the frustrations with this episode. It was a lot of references to the team being kids and inadequate.
Yeah.
It wasn't super smooth. The choreography wasn't great. I know you have some other thoughts about this. Go ahead and take it here.
No, it's just like Kid Flash making like a potty joke. It just wasn't very funny. With Robin and his utility belt. It was like much young. He's 15, 16. I mean, The joke he made was like an 8-year-old. It's like they hadn't quite nailed the character of Wally yet. But really the choreography, there's so much clean choreography in the rest of the season. It even drives me even more nuts now that I've seen so much. They're fighting this Twister, right? And he turns out to be an android. He's not Red Tornado, but he is an android. And they're fighting this android. They're ripping its arms off. Superboy obviously punches it straight through the middle. Like you can see his hand in the hole out the back of the middle of the torso. All of these things that they're pounding on it. But when they finally do so much damage to this android that it crashes, the front of it pops open and you see that there's a driver, like it's a mech. And the driver falls out. And then Miss Martian crushes the driver with a rock, which freaks everybody out, right? Because they're like, we don't execute our prisoners situation.
Yeah, Robin has a huge freak out line. I don't know how you do things on Mars, but on Earth we don't execute our prisoners.
Right, and that's where the line, I thought you trusted me, comes from, which is fine, but it's just not tight. Superboy clearly punched this thing straight through the torso. It would have gone straight through that android. If it had actually been a driver, it would have killed him. So then everybody gets really pissed and upset at Miss Martian for doing this thing when none of them self-registers like, oh my God, we could have killed this guy. Like we made another mistake, right? And then when the driver comes out and she crushes the driver with a rock, it turns out that he's just another android. So there was an android driving the android. And this was all created by T.O. Morrow, Thomas O. Morrow, who's a classic DC long-term villain who hounded the Justice Society back in the 1930s and 40s.
And we know he's a classic because he's got a horrible pun for a name.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Evidence of all Golden Age comics, either alliteration or horrible puns.
Alliteration, horrible puns, or you're some kind of primate.
Also true, yes.
Yes, which we'll get into later about how many primates there are in the DC universe as villains. None of this stuff made a lot of sense. I know T.O. Morrow is a bit bonkers, right? And I get it, but why do you create an android like Twister and then make it a piloting android and then make an android to pilot the android? It really felt forced to get an emotional reaction to make the point about maybe we shouldn't trust Miss Martian. Like the whole thing just seemed to be contrived to get that one moment of we don't execute our prisoners moment. And it just felt like it missed the mark. Like it kind of hit because you're like, oh God, there's a person in there. And then she killed him. And then you're like, oh my God, what happened? And then I just felt manipulated. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then you cut to T.O. Morrow and he's like, are you glad I didn't let you pilot the Twister suit now, Brahm, which is his assistant, and he made an android that looked exactly like the assistant. If later on in the series, for some reason, we saw that there was like 50 Brahms and they're all androids and running around and he's using them as servants or something, I don't know, maybe that would have made some sense. It just all seemed really contrived. It really bugged me, particularly because the choreography and all of the rest of the stuff is really thought out so well, especially in the finale. The finale was so good. Every beat of that combat was made with thought and precision, and this was just your standard, like we kept saying, it's your standard animated series where they're just not paying attention to the details and they're just throwing action on the screen.
All that being said, there were a few specific things that happened in this fight that I think are really, really good. And they're really, really minor. One of them is Wally getting a souvenir.
Right, that's true. That's the start of the souvenir trend, which was good. I agree.
And that is something that we see mostly during season 1. That kind of falls off a little bit in season 2, but that's because the focus of season 2 has shifted so much.
Right.
But through a lot of season 1, we see Wally getting souvenirs, and that actually plays into a lot of the other episodes. So seeing it here for the first time is very cool. Another thing I really liked is that when Miss Martian comes back with her plan, we don't see her communicating the plan to the team. We just see the plan happen.
That's true. And the plan was a good plan. It was a good plan. It was not executed with the subtlety of, say, Calder's plans later on, but it was a good plan. Like, I was not sure if that was Red Tornado showing up or not. I kind of figured it wasn't, but I wasn't sure what was happening. And then you realize that it's Miss Martian shapeshifted as Red Tornado. She was using her telekinetic abilities along with Kid Flash spinning and doing his tornado shtick to duplicate Red Tornado's powers. It was a pretty cute idea. It worked. It pulled off for sure. But there was just a lot of brutality in that fight. And later on you see, particularly even in just the next episode we'll be talking about in Drop Zone, there's once they decide who the leader is going to be, you start seeing some more subtlety and plan and thought in what their fights are going to be like. And an argument could be made that this is one of their early fights together, and that's fine, and that's okay. But when you're talking about the very early parts of a show, you want to grab people as much as you can. And this one was just okay. Luckily, the next episode was really good and helped to kind of really make me realize that maybe there'd be something else going on with it.
I absolutely agree with you, Rich. The last point I wanted to make, super, super subtle, and you already brought it up. When Red Tornado does show up, it's Miss Martian, right?
Yeah.
As Red Tornado is flying in, he very quickly says a line about hitting the showers, which in rewatching the episode many times, I now remember that someone else said that to Miss Martian just a few beats ago when they were yelling at her, saying that she was a rookie.
Oh, was that Wally? Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. So the fact that when Red Tornado shows up and he says the exact same phrasing, I didn't notice it the first few times around, but in watching it this morning before we recorded, I suddenly clicked in my head, oh, there's a fun little throwback telling us, if we were paying attention, since the echo is there, it's a quick logical assumption, kind of a sneak preview of the eventual reveal that it's actually Miss Martian.
Right, that's a great callback. Hit the showers, boys. Yeah.
Fun little nod there.
I didn't catch that. And I have to admit, I've seen the entire first season scores probably of times at this point in time now, but I regularly skip this episode. It's just doesn't have a lot of stuff for me, so that's a click that I missed. That's cool.
And there's one other line I specifically want to bring up, but I want to save that for Crashing the Mode because it plays into later events so much. So let's move on to our Canary debrief.
I nodded to a few things in the Canary debrief regarding storytelling, and Caleb brought up the really important one. So much telling in this, so much exposition in this episode, which is unfortunate. It may have been necessary. I have a hard time believing it was, but it was just a lot. It was a lot. And I'm glad we got past it and moved on to the rest of the season. It was definitely an important episode for introducing what every character can do and can't do, particularly with Miss Martian, because we didn't get to see her powers in the pilot. We found out that she can shapeshift. She has a hard time duplicating boys. That doesn't really come up again, though she becomes Red Tornado, which is an android, so I guess that was easier for her. I'm not quite sure why that would be easier. We also find out that she can't phase through walls or density shifts. She actually makes a comment that that's an advanced technique. But she can turn invisible and fly, which is great. So the density shifting thing could have been a huge, game-changing power. And it becomes one in the second season because she learns how to do it. I guess that was a spoiler. I don't know. But in this one, it's good. We needed to know what those things were. And the fact that Wally also can't do the flash stick of vibrating through walls. So now we know that there's no one in the group that can just walk through walls into a vault and save people's lives or whatever. So it's important, right? It lays the groundwork for some future story arcs about Red Tornado and Tio Maro and some of the other androids, but they're not as integral. They're interesting and they're a part of the series, but they're not as integral to the meta plot necessarily, so it doesn't feel like it really is that necessary, I guess. I already talked about the android pilot from a storytelling standpoint. Didn't make any sense. Take a stop, take a deep breath, dig a little deeper, and figure out a better way to get the feeling that you want on that kind of story. If something feels contrived, your reader or your watcher or your player will not maybe recognize exactly what it is that bothered them about a scene that's contrived, but they will walk away with an emotional memory that isn't right, that the character didn't act the way that they were supposed to, that they went left when they really should have gone right because of their character development story arc, and it's clear that the author or the writer or the director just wanted them to go left because of a plot point. And definitely sit with those things and take a broader look.
Absolutely agree with you across the board there. A lot of what happened here is really just setting up the future of the series. And unfortunately, it just wasn't handled in the best way possible. Still very entertaining, though.
Yeah.
All of that being said, we've covered a lot of points here about storytelling this episode already. So let's move on and crash the mode here with some spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers and foreshadowing, people. Fast forward past this if you don't want it.
Yep, skip ahead a little bit if you want to be surprised if you're watching along, assuming you are still listening at this point. There wasn't a whole lot of foreshadowing here. There wasn't a whole lot of really spoilery things. There was a little bit with Tio Maro,
Yep.
because the androids do come up later on.
They do.
Like you just said a minute ago, they're not integral to the main plot. They do become an important plot,
Right.
Especially later on when Artemis is there.
Right.
But they're not part of the whole light and what the light's doing.
Right. And it's interesting to me because this is something that I would normally not recommend people do. If you're going to have, say, somebody who's an expert with androids and robotics in your story, your show, your book, don't have two of them. Have one and have that person be the expert. In this case, it's a little different, though, because in addition to Tio Maro, who they already introduce, we also have Professor Ivo. And if some of you watched the original Justice League animated series, then you know that name sounds familiar because there was a version of Amazo, who we will talk about in a few episodes in detail, in that Justice League animated series. And there's a rivalry between Tio Maro and Ivo, and it gives it again works to give a complex picture of the larger DC universe for this series, which works really, really well. They do, the light does need, they are working on nanotechnology, they're working on robotics, they're working on mind control of various kinds, they're working on all of this technology and magic to move their plan forward, which is fantastic. And then giving these nods to Tio Maro. You have Red Tornado, you kind of have to have Tio Maro, but Ivo is a much better character as far as the robotics are concerned for the plot that they have, and they fold that in really well. And it feels like there's like even the villains have rivalries, and it just feels like each of these characters are richer because of that.
And there are a couple points about Miss Martian, Megan, that are important here. Mostly Megan herself, Megan,
yeah.
The identity that she has. She makes a very quick mention of making cookies from an episode and then stops herself from finishing that sentence.
McGann says, "Oh, my cookies burned, and I was trying to duplicate somebody's recipe from episode. Oh, never mind." It just didn't occur to me, like at the time, and when you rewatch it, you're going to see a lot of this stuff, a lot of nods to the fact that McGann's human Megan Morse identity is tied to a TV show that she watched that was on Mars, that she related to and basically became a giant fangirl of. So when she came to Earth and needed to have an identity and needed to have a person to emulate or to become, she became literally shapeshifted into this character, which nobody else knows about because the show only ran for one season or half of a season. It was canceled. It wasn't even really aired very much. You can't find it online. We find all these things out later when the rest of the team discovers that this character is a facade she's putting on. And yeah, this is the spoiler section, people. I'm spoilering it. She's not a Green Martian. She's not a Green Martian at all. She's not only not who she says she is, she's so not who she says she is. She is a horrifying looking monster, a white Martian on Mars who is a minority in this particular story arc, is a minority on Mars, who we still don't know exactly why, but for some reason, Jahan, the Martian Manhunter, had kind of quote unquote adopted and took care of for some reason, which is very in with his personality that he would do that. But because white Martians and Green Martians can both shapeshift, she can shapeshift and to make herself look like a Green Martian, and then took it a step further to adopt this identity on Earth. The first time that I watched this series, I keep talking about how Megan just bugged me to no end. And then when I got to the episodes where we were revealing this, I thought, oh, the writers heard people complaining about how ditzy this character is and retconned an interesting history for her. Because I thought it was like any other show. They're just kind of throwing things on the wall and seeing what sticks because we hadn't gotten to the big reveals of the finales. And then I went back and rewatched it and then saw this bit and I was like, Oh man, I totally owe them an apology. Like, they knew what they were doing from the very beginning. You'll see there are episodes of Hello Megan playing in the background of scenes later on in various episodes in the future, and the theme song will show up in places, and like they were laying this groundwork early.
And one of the other really, really important things that I only realized as I was rewatching this episode this morning, right after Megan first talks to everyone telepathically, I believe it's Wally says to her, it's okay to do this with the bad guys.
Yeah, it was, they were saying something like, oh, you should read Twister's mind. And she said, you said I shouldn't read people's minds. It was Dick. It was Robin.
Oh, okay.
Robin said, it's okay with the bad guys. Go ahead, keep going. I think I know where your thought's going.
As we get into season 2, that dynamic of using her telepathy becomes a monumentally major plot point in not only the story arc, but also her character development.
Right.
And I just realized today that essentially it all starts here. She is learning the culture of Earth.
That heart-rending season 2 bit where she's doing horrible things with her telepathy. And you find out that in between season 1 and season 2, she did, I don't even know what, but it was not good.
Right.
Whatever that was not good. Not good to the point where Superboy's like, you need to stop doing this. Like, this is not okay. Which, again, takes this kind of supposedly, the idea that this character that Megan is portraying is this ditzy, almost cliched TV teenager now makes perfect sense because she's literally shape-changed herself into a ditzy teenage TV sitcom character, right? And we find out who she is and how she grows and who she becomes, and sometimes the darker sides of her strong powers later on in the show. Fantastic. Just, right. I can talk about Megan all day. She's amazing.
And really what hit me the most playing off of all of that is the hindsight that future moment is set up right here in episode 3. She's vulnerable. She doesn't know where she is. She's trying to learn the culture of Earth. She's trying to create a family. And she essentially takes a throwaway comment to heart so deeply that it changes who she is through the course of these years in the program.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I got chills thinking about the terrible, terrible things she does to somebody in season 2 that I will not spoil at the moment. We're gonna leave that for.
All right, so we're gonna leave that spoiler.
We're gonna leave that major spoiler because that just opens a whole can of worms I don't want to get into. Yeah.
So we'll wrap up Crashing the Mode here with that tease for the distant future, and let's move towards concluding today's episode with a little bit of fan service, Rich.
It's fan service. Today we're going to talk about a couple of Facebook groups. If you guys are on Facebook at all, I highly recommend 2 groups. One of them is called Young Justice Needs a Season 3. This Facebook group has well over 400,000 likes. It's nearly 500,000 people following this Facebook group. It's a fantastic portal for all things Young Justice and Titans. I see a lot of killer fan art there, anime music videos, links, news, all kinds of stuff. Both of these websites are fantastic for that kind of stuff. The other one is called the Titans Together Facebook group. It had originally started as, it was called Titans Together TNT, because there was going to be a live action Titans show on TNT that ended up getting canceled. So that was their original focus, but they switched it over to doing basically everything Titans. So the Young Justice show, the Titans comics, pretty much anything that comes out. And it's the same thing as the other group in that they've got fan art, they post links, news, and all kinds of stuff. So if you're on Facebook, go over and check out those groups and get constant updates and comments and find some other fans as well. We'll have links on the website, Caleb?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have links in the show notes specifically, and we will add some of these links to our resource page on crashingthemode.com. And of course, on crashingthemode.com, that is where we have our featured art gallery. So every so often, swing by and find a new featured artist on the homepage. Check out their awesome fan work. And hey, if you are an artist and want to be featured, go ahead and get a hold of us. Whelmedpodcast@gmail.com or at the YJ Files on Twitter.
As well, too, if you guys have favorite things, if you have AMVs or you have news or art, as Caleb mentioned, anything that is your favorite thing that has to do with Young Justice. Fanfic, I would love to read some fanfic and see what's going on with that in that arena. Send that to us, too, or give us some links and so we can check on it and spread the word.
Wonderful. So unless you have anything else to add in here, Mr. Rich, I think we can put episode 2 to bed.
I have one last thing.
Oh, there we go. Final word. I hand it back to you, Rich.
Hashtag keep binging YJ. Keep binging YJ, guys. I know it's been a while. We've been doing it for a long time. It's trended on Netflix, but I know Netflix is in negotiations. The customer service has said that over and over and over again to people who have asked them. So they are in negotiations trying to get the rights to be able to do a season 3 of Young Justice. But to do that, they need to continue to get that encouragement. They need to still have that those numbers crunching on Netflix. So please keep binging YJ on Netflix so they get those numbers up, and then use the hashtag keep binging YJ whenever you post about it on Twitter, Facebook, or your social media of choice.
And that is binging, not bringing, that I mistakenly thought it was for quite some time.
Yeah, you're not the only one. There's actually a giant group for Keep Bringing YJ as well, just because I think you're not the only person. But Keep Binging YJ is what Greg Weisman, the showrunner for Young Justice, recommends using. Keep Binging YJ.
Alrighty, guys, so keep binging YJ. Keep listening to the Whelmed podcast. Thank you so much for your time today. For Rich and myself, see you next time. You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.